listening to the sweet sounds of the After Movie Diner. Support us at patreon.com/After Movie Diner. Or I'll punch you in the teats. Rate and review us on iTunes, Earthling. And now, here's your host, John Cross.
Hello and welcome to the After Movie Diner. And I have to say, this feels like an ominous introduction because the path down which we have stumbled, fallen, and bumped our genitals may just kill this podcast dead. At the end of last week's episode, in a thrilling cliffhanger of soap opera proportions, we came up with the decision, or rather, I think, I'm going to blame it on Jim. I'm going to say Jim.
Was it really?
It was really you. It was really you. You said you would be up for. It started off that we were going to do post-Python movies.
That's right, which was a good idea.
We were going to do like bad post-Python movies to see where it all went wrong, and then I got into the fact that Eric Idle has by far had the worst of the post-Python careers, bolstered temporarily by the fact that once Fishkill Wonder hit, all the Pythons went scurrying to Hollywood Studios, or Hollywood Studios came scurrying to the Pythons, and they all took full advantage of it, Idle included, with Splitting Hairs. So that's where the conversation kind of grew out of. And it was decided, as I said, in a thrilling cliffhanger, that we were going to do a series of bad Eric Idle films. But here's my thing. My thing is that people tune in to hear us talk, hopefully interestingly, but also stupidly and jokingly about films, right? And also to give each other grief and whatever, right? And to call out our wonderful listeners for sometimes living in a shed. So that's why they tune in. I'm not sure anymore that the movie matters. We're the only ones that are inflicting ourselves with these terrible films.
That's fair.
I don't think at any point are we going to suggest that anyone watch any of these films.
Nice.
Well, it's the outrageously bad Eric Idle film season. Yeah, it's the outrageously bad Eric Idle film season. And in typical Idle fashion, I thought I'd start it with a song. Nobody asked me to, but I need to make more references to penises and dongs. And some thinly veiled innuendos about tits that some might think passes for wit, and ingratiates me with the LA set, who are quick to embrace me and quick to forget that I've made some truly outrageously bad films for some reason. Well, here's the After Movie Diner, back to remind you with the outrageously bad Eric Idle film season. It's the outrageously bad Eric Idle film season. It's the outrageously bad Eric Idle film season. Outrageously bad. Oh yeah, you gotta always look on the bright side of life, except during the outrageously bad Eric Idle film season. And this song has gone on far too long without mentioning my dong. Oh, something like that anyway. Boobs. So anyway, hello Jim. Lovely to have you back on the show as always. A pleasure.
Back, mate.
And to be honest, as utterly horrible as the experience of watching the movie that we're going to talk about today was, it hasn't put me off doing the other three.
No, it hasn't. No, me neither. Because it was so awful.
Yeah.
It was like, you know that bit in The Producers where it like cuts to the audience and the whole audience is there in silence wearing those like shocked faces?
Mind-blowing expression.
That's the face I had for most of the movie.
Right, yeah. Most of this horrible, misogynistic, racist, sexist, horrible film. It really was.
So let me ask you a question. Quick question.
Yeah.
At what point, how quickly did you know it was going to be appalling?
Oh, within about 2 minutes.
I mean,
I knew because first of all, I didn't get the Stallone joke that they opened the movie with. I didn't even get the joke.
Was there? So when you say I don't get the joke, you're assuming that there was a joke.
Well, it's supposed to be a joke, and then, but the thing that really tipped me off was that it's only 85 minutes long. And then the opening credits went on for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, the opening credits is 10 minutes, and the ending credits is 10 minutes. Yeah.
Is that what I'm going to go? These credits are going on for a very long time, given that it's just some graffiti in Hollywood and some song. Yeah. And they're taking their sweet time putting every single person up on the screen.
Yeah.
This is probably not a good sign.
No, not a good sign at all. But we'll get into it. We are talking about Burn, Hollywood, Burn, An Alan Smithee Film, because we're going chronologically backwards through the 4 worst idol films we could find.
It's a good description for the series. Like, we're going chronologically backwards through the worst Eric Idle films we could find. I just think that's delightful.
It is delightful.
Like,
and
there's a logic. It's the worst ones that we can find, and we're going backwards chronologically. We're not just picking these out of our arse here. There's a plan.
There is an absolute... there's an absolute direct plan of action. We have the movies in our grasp. I sourced them. I found them. We have them. And we're doing this properly. We're doing this as committed as we were to the detective series. I've just realized that this year we've basically done a bunch of series. We've done Sleazy Spader. We did our unofficial run of detective films, which was like 5 or 6 long. Then we went straight into Pleasance, which was ended up being 5 movies, and now we're rolling into Eric Idle movies.
He's going to take us into 2021.
Yeah, and then for New Year, I'm covering a bunch of Christopher Walken movies. So really, we've run the gamut here at the After Movie Diner in 2020.
I don't think those things have ever been roped together under the term gamut. But nor will they ever again.
I don't... Jeff, look in the dictionary. I don't quite know how we define the word gamut at this point. If some ludicrous podcaster in New York is going to rope some of these atrocious things under that umbrella. I do want to, before we go too far, because people might at this point be turning off in droves, mention a gentleman by the name of William Kitchen, who is commenting on the After Movie Diner and Dr. Action Facebook group today on the post that I made about Burn, Hollywood, Burn, An Alan Smithee Film, where he pointed me towards Esther House's book, where apparently he talks about this. Book. I have not read it, and I'm not about to. Well, I'm certainly.
It's actually pretty good. It's called Hollywood Animal, and it's quite good. I mean, he's a bit of an arse. Yeah. I mean, he's more than a bit of an arse. He's a huge arse.
Yeah,
it is quite interesting.
No. I imagine it is. I'm just saying, I obviously didn't read it in preparation for this movie. And so if I haven't read it in preparation for this movie, I don't know what my impetus would be to then go back and read it. Unless after we've recorded this episode, I'm still as perplexed and bewildered by this film as I currently am. I'm hoping to get some answers, Jim, from you, because you are Mr. Speculation.
Good point.
But after a nice conversation with Mr. Kitchen, he did say that also, because of you and your wonderful example, my buddies and I started a podcast. So most people who know the After Movie Diner know that I was thoroughly inspired by the Profondo Cinema guys, and it has long been my wish that in some weird way the After Movie Diner would itself inspire and spawn its own podcast. And the wonderful Mr. Kitchen has told me that we were its inspiration. So I said, really, dude, you guys started a podcast inspired by our silly show. That's amazing. Thank you. And he said, it's not a silly show at all. You were a good example. We are still learning. We are going to have a Christmas movie episode in the next couple of days. But his show is called Borderline Hostility. It started in 2020. It's available over on YouTube. So just go to YouTube and search Borderline Hostility. I believe they have 3 or 4 episodes up already. I don't know if it's on any other podcast platforms. I'm afraid I haven't looked. But it's sort of political in nature. They're talking about both news and politics, but they also bring movies into it. So I'm certainly going to give it a listen myself, but I wanted to give William Kitchen a shout out because why not? If someone was inspired by our, as I say, silly little show, and I stand by that statement, it is a very silly little show, then...
It is very silly, and it is very little.
But he posted episode 3 called The 2020 Election. He said, "It is political, but I do tell a story about me crapping my shorts on an exercise bike." So it's got something for everybody.
Yeah.
And then there's lots of people saying that I should read Hollywood Animal. And that's about it. But I wanted to give William Kitchen a shout out before too many people turned off because, credit where credit's due. If we inspired someone to start a podcast, then, they deserve a shout out on our show. That's all I'm saying. Would you not agree, Jem?
No, I absolutely agree. I think anybody that writes to us deserves a shout out. That's my strong and immovable opinion.
Yes. John did write another comment on YouTube. John must listen to our shows in a random order. He certainly doesn't listen to them in order anymore, but he listened to the Raw Meat episode and he said, "Another excellent supermarket listen. Great to hear Jim discuss the cross musical genius. I too agree that some of the greatest cross work in music, dare I mention Cleethorpes and In the Morning, are carefree, improvised, off the cuff." And he said, "I loved the Pleasance tracks I heard as well." And since he made that comment on YouTube, John has gone ahead and purchased the Pleasancing 2, which is still available for purchase over at Bandcamp, miskplumbingfixtures.bandcamp.com. But that's all I'm going to say of it, because we just did 5 episodes where we talked about the Pleasancing. But thank you ever so much, John, for your comment on the Raw Meat YouTube podcast. So, without further ado, sir, I really do think we need to...
Is there any more ado? No. Is there such a thing as more ado? Isn't that all the ado?
No, Jim, come on. How long have you co-hosted this podcast? There is so much ado that we could
There is always more ado. That's true. That could be the slogan of the show. The After Movie Diner, there's always more
ado. However, I've really just been putting off talking about this film. Burn Hollywood Burn, An Alan Smithee Film, starring Eric Idle, Ryan O'Neal, Whoopi Goldberg, Sly Stallone.
According to the poster on Amazon, when you rent it, it stars Whoopi Goldberg, Jackie Chan, and Sylvester Stallone, which I feel is like borderline fraud, isn't it? Basically.
I mean, put it this way. They appeared in the movie a lot more than I thought they were going to. Like, I literally thought they were in a cameo at the beginning, and yet they keep cutting back to them for reasons known only, I suppose, to Eszterhas, who has his grubby, chubby, manky, cum-flecked sausage fingers all over this disgusting and despicable film. Really, in all honesty, it stars Ryan O'Neal and Richard Jeni as 2 of the most annoying actors who have ever existed. And then co-stars Eric Idle as What Is He Doing in This Film, and Coolio and Chuck D as some just awful commentary on like the early 90s African American filmmaking, which is, I mean, it's so mind-bogglingly racist and bizarre. I don't even know where to begin with that. And of course, everyone's favorite Hollywood star, Harvey Weinstein. That was nice to see him crop up in this film, as if the monkey turds that Esther House was flinging from his cage couldn't be more despicable. He put in everyone's favorite rapist producer, and mine, Harvey Weinstein. So that was just wonderful. Coupled with a whole bunch of...
Was that the most despicable... I mean, obviously he is despicable.
Right.
But was that the most despicable moment in the movie? Because I'd argue...
No, it's not the most despicable... there are several despicable moments in the movie.
What's the one that chilled you to the bone the most?
When the third caption came up for a female in the film, and it had them listed all as feminists, as if it's a running gag that a woman would be a feminist.
So weird.
Well, because it's Eszterhas being like, oh, bloody women, with their bloody opinions about being bloody women. Like it's less than a high school joke. You know what I mean? That women would be let's just credit every woman with being a feminist. It's so.
I don't know, man. I had to say, and don't get me wrong, that was bad. But
and then weirdly cast all the women in it to play essentially like whores, tarts, and strumpets. Like there isn't like a decent person.
The bit where I guess the strumpet expresses how she started to have feelings for Alan Smithee, having been sent over there by the producer.
Yeah, and
she reflects in a moment of like honesty and melancholy at how the fact that Alan Smithee treated her like a human being, it like deeply, if like she was unused to being treated like a human being. And then Robert Evans, the actual Robert Evans, walks in, objectifies her, asks her to call him daddy, and then says it's a good thing daddy likes incest. That was the bit that made me want to die.
Yeah.
Because it's not just that all of that was awful. It's just that they said to Robert Evans, you see, what happens is, it's funny because you're a monster. You know what I mean? He's like, yeah, I like it. It's great. What a great part where I'm a monster. So, where I walk in there and I'm a monster. And it's really funny how I'm a monster.
So this,
and it just made me want to die.
Yeah, no. So this is a pall that's hanging over this film. That's quite. This is the thing that I could not wrap my head around, and I'm not even kidding. The other morning I woke up
screaming,
and and my brain was like mathematically trying to figure it out, right? Because it sold, and I believe they thought they were making a Hollywood satire, right?
Yes.
Now,
that's what they thought they were doing.
Now, most Hollywood satires, even the good ones, even something like The Player or whatever,
right,
fully admit that certainly when it comes to studios and certainly when it comes to either decision makers and or producers within the studios, that they are, hoary fucking horned-backed monsters, right? Most satires do that. Right. What was so bizarre about this film, and again, it may be watching it with hindsight, it may be, watching it post Me Too movement, post Black Lives Matter movement, post
one of the girls being arrested for being a horrible rapist,
right? Post Esther House's career going down the toilet, etc., etc. It may be.
This feels like it was screamed from the toilet as the flush was like taking him down.
Oh yeah, completely. But what I'm saying is, the weird thing watching it now is that rather than being the satire it hopes it is, because nobody either on set or behind the camera knows what the word satire means. That's the first thing.
They have no clue.
Certainly couldn't write a satire if they tried, or even improv one, as most of this seemed to be like half-assedly improv. The weird thing about this movie, the thing that overall chilled me to the bone and was a pall on it, was exactly kind of what you just described, which is what screams from this movie is not what a satire it is, but how depressingly real it is, and how inside it is. Like, what's hilarious about this is it's a movie that apparently cost $10 million. I can only assume that was to secure Stallone and Jackie Chan and Whoopi Goldberg. I can't imagine where else the money went, because it was literally filmed in people's
everybody's noses, presumably.
Right. Or okay, fair, on like drugs and whatever and just general extravagance, but like it was filmed in the backyards of where they all lived, or in restaurants where they had truck with a maitre d'. Like, it wasn't, there's no big grand like fucking set pieces or anything. Like, it's literally 2-camera mockumentary style speaking. There's like nothing else happens in it, right? So apart from some of the absolute worst fake driving scenes I've ever seen in my entire life, but we'll get to that. The weird thing about the movie is how abundant, because it isn't funny, like flat out not funny at all, and because it's so inside, it's a $10 million picture that's literally made for the pleasure of about 10 people. Like, that's what's also just like trying to wrap your head around it is just so fucking weird, because it's literally made for Esther House, and his pals, and all of his pals are despicable human beings. But what's weird about it is that instead of, like I say, either playfully poking fun at Hollywood, or like really darkly ripping Hollywood a new one, what it just does is kind of go, yep, this is Hollywood, and it's horrible, and all these people are millionaires, and now just feel, so sick and so dark and so depressed, enjoy the film. Like, that's kind of what, and it's so, I can't quite describe it. I'm pretty sure you just did it better with your brief description. But what has haunted me about the film, and also what's intrigued me about the film, is, make this on a weekend with a camera you borrowed from the studio, and occasionally like show it in your, screening room at your house at Hollywood parties. But who thought anybody else on the planet needed to see this horrible display of just how grotesque everybody is? You know what I mean?
I do. Thinking about it, in the moments that were allowed for thought in between my subconscious screaming,
right,
was like, you can see what the idea of the film is, right, at its heart, right, that presumably everybody in Hollywood has a story, right, a story of how an actor did this, or an actress did something, or like something that happened to a movie, or this great movie that nobody saw because X happened, whatever, right? They've all been at some restaurant, right, late at night, and somebody's told a story. And the best stories are probably ones told by 2 or 3 people that were there, right? Like, I was the producer, and you, like, this guy was like the agent for the lead actor, and this guy was like, one of the distributors or something, right? But there's like 2 or 3 people around a table late at night, and they're telling this like legendary story, and there's like, it's the story's told by lots of people, and they, it's one of the most entertaining things about being in Hollywood is like being told one of these stories, right? And Esther House is like, well, that would make a good movie, right? It wouldn't cost too much money. I could rope in, some famous people. It's just an afternoon shooting with a camera. It wouldn't take too long. All I've got to do is come up with a decent idea for a picture, tell the story in that kind of like narrative, fun, larger than life way, and you'll end up with, it only costs 10 million, but it'll take a bomb, because everybody will, they'll get like the real Hollywood, and it'll do great. And then the idea he comes up with is, again, not a bad one, right? The idea of a director who didn't want his name put out there. For whatever reason, he wasn't able to take his name off the picture like people do. So he steals the movie, burns it, and in the process gets a load of credibility, which allows him to do everything he wanted in the first place, which is basically own his own movie, right? And that right there is where everything promising and good stopped happening. Because the main problem that Esther House has with that idea is that he can't write, and he's not funny. So there's those are the two big problems. He's obviously a good ideas man, and he's also okay at putting together enough scenes that kind of get that idea across. But I wouldn't be surprised if his scripts weren't like really heavily rewritten, every single one, because he obviously doesn't have an ounce of talent or an ear for dialogue or any kind of wit or sense, right? So how are you going to end up with a good movie if the bloke who's writing it, if the strength of the whole movie is the story, everything is the story. If the story is no good and the people you get as actors also aren't really very good, they're just like, yeah, they're big Hollywood names, but they're not actually, do you know what I mean? They don't, there's no hidden depth there to be exploring. You know what I mean? They're all being about as shallow and two-dimensional as you would expect them to be. I expect like Stallone's maybe more interesting than that, but he came down a few notches of estimation just appearing in the movie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and so what is weird to me is this, right? So the rise of Esther House is fairly well known. He writes for the best part of 2 decades, mainly the 80s and 90s, and hits big with stuff like Flashdance, Jagged Edge, Basic Instinct, Sliver, and Showgirls. They're really his big ones. And then there's other ones like the Jean-Claude Van Damme Nowhere to Run, which people, have seen, and a couple of others. Fist and Hearts of Fire.
Nowhere to Run, which people
have seen. But in general, what ended up happening was after a few of his early ones hit, and the likes of Shane Black then making $1 million for selling Lethal Weapon. Shane Black, who was also a friend of his at the time, hence why he also appears in the movie. God, that was also embarrassing. I bet Shane Black now would love to bury that movie. But Hollywood starts offering Esther House more and more money for basically every fucking idea he can cough onto a napkin, right? And how, I don't quite know how, but he basically manages to kind of shuffle his way through kind of the post-Basic Instinct furor and popularity with kind of Basic Instinct knockoffs of like Slither and Showgirls and stuff like that. And it's sort of a completely, bizarre, weird situation because you kind of want to say, like Basic Instinct, for example, Sharon Stone claims one thing, that it was an absolute horrible experience where she was objectified, didn't know where the camera was going, yada, 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 but then happily stars in Sliver the next year. And there's weird things like that abounding throughout. Like, for example, Eric Idle says that when he first read the script to Burn Hollywood Burn and met with Arthur Hiller and was shooting essentially Arthur Hiller's version of the film to begin with, that like Arthur Hiller was threading drama throughout the script, so it wasn't just going to be comedy, that Arthur Hiller wasn't leaning so heavily on just the mockumentary style, it was going to be like more than that and different than that, and they were trying to tell this really interesting story about this director who was trying, like everything you just said, right? And I'm like, not that I believe Eric Idle is any kind of judge, if anything, but I'm going to give him the credit that he at least read, there was at least at some point, I don't know if it was Esther House or if it was, rewritten by a bunch of people or whatever it is, but I'm going to say that there was a script for Burn Hollywood Burn at some point that was A, readable, B, had some jokes in it, and C, had something for the Alan Smithee character to do. Because what the end result, which if people don't know, the end result is that Arthur Hiller apparently, allegedly, had the film taken away from him and re-edited by Esther House, even though Esther House says that he was in the edit suite the whole time, that the studio watched both versions, the studio picked Esther House's version, and they went with that. And Arthur Hiller took his name off it, thus An Alan Smithee Film, Burn Hollywood Burn, was actually directed by Alan Smithee. Some think that was a sly marketing plan, and others think that he legitimately took his name off it, and it was just unfortunate that the Directors Guild had to use Alan Smithee in order to have a name on the film. The irony being that the Directors Guild immediately stopped using Alan Smithee the moment this film came out. Anyway, I'm assuming there was at some point a script that someone of Eric Idle's caliber, whatever you consider that to be, read and was like, okay, I'll do this, right?
He's A caliber.
No, the only reason I'm saying...
A caliber.
A caliber. The only reason I'm saying this, and I think you'll probably see where I'm coming from, is that everyone else in the film, right, apart from like a couple of the like character actors, like Stephen Tobolowsky shows up for like one scene or whatever. Well, I mean, he shows up for, you know, an opening of a sandwich, so that's fine. Like, you understand that he's in everything, and that's fine. That's Tobolowsky. That's what he does. But outside of that, everyone else in the movie, you can totally understand why they're there. They're part of Esther House's Hollywood set. They sit around his swimming pool. He, you know, regales them with ridiculous, probably titty-filled stories. And they're all like, sure, we'll show up, Esther House. You know, let's get a studio to pay for this. Won't this all be shits and giggles? The only person that doesn't quite fit into that is Eric Idle. However, he may fit into that on the idea of, you know, a member of Monty Python decamping and moving to Hollywood and, you know, having a few famous friends like George Harrison and Carrie Fisher and people like that. Maybe Eric Idle does turn up at a couple of these parties, and maybe he, you know, does get a few drinks or whatever, and he is just like, sure, I'll do it. Like, who knows? You could at least make some leaps. But I'm going to go and say that there was at some point a script, and that either before the filming or during the filming, that script was actively tossed out. And either Arthur Hiller got so enamored by the fact that Esther House had been making millions of dollars for all of his movies and thought, you know, great, I'll just ride this gravy train and let Esther House do whatever. Or Hiller, or there's a version of this movie out there somewhere that is whatever that script was.
Do you know what my problem with that whole theory is, though? And
Esther House took it and edited it into this movie. And my last point about it is that this movie, outside of all the hideousness in it, it is like watching someone who has taken a bunch of disparate scenes that were filmed, you know, higgledy-piggledy by a crazy person, and someone who has edited together and cobbled it together, not as best as they could, because I've seen better editing jobs, done by infants, but cobbled it together into something that resembles whatever Esther House's original idea is. But the movie watches like that. When you watch the movie, it watches like he was sat in an edit suite going, oh God, do we have Idle saying, then I ran out a window? Oh yeah, I think we have that on Reel 10. Okay, we'll just use that to get us to this next bit. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it reads like that. It doesn't read like there was a script or a storyboard or a plan or a plot, or, I mean, it doesn't, like, none of that. It reads like, here's a bunch of disparate scenes that we have to somehow cobble together into a movie. My question is, why, when you saw all those disparate scenes and realized they were all shit, did you not just go, okay, let's all just back out the door and hope nobody notices and never release this? Anyway, sorry, I've talked long enough. You go.
No. I mean, here's the thing, right? You could be right, but the only thing that stands against that as a theory, and I'm not necessarily discounting it either, because
Idle said that, by the way, in interviews on more than one occasion. It doesn't mean it's true. I'm just saying that.
No, I know that. I'm not calling you a liar. I'm not calling Eric Idle a liar. I just, my only problem with that is that at the end, during the interminable credit sequence containing literally the worst ending song on a movie I've ever heard. Like, the song itself is so the spirit of the movie. It's completely crap. Goes on way too long and is like pointless. There's no tune or
do you know the story behind the soundtrack?
No.
So the reason why that caption comes up at the end of the movie that says soundtrack featuring the best unknown bands you've never heard of or something available now is that when the studio, presumably having seen the dailies, said to Esther House, "You've got no more money. Like, whatever you have, you can edit it. We'll let you edit it. But at this point, like, that's it. We're not giving you any more money." This was Synergy, the studio. Esther House was like, "Well, we need a soundtrack for the movie," and they were like, "No, use like library music or whatever." He apparently went. I don't know whether he went out into Hollywood, went online, or went wherever. I don't know, but he apparently got people to send him unknown bands, unsigned bands, unheard of bands. He put the call out, and apparently, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people sent him CDs. And he spent like a weekend scanning the CDs. And when he found a song that was like remotely passable, he put that on the "that's going in" list. And that's how he put together the soundtrack.
Well, that explains why that ending song is so terrible, because the longer the movie goes on, the more you think, well, they're never going to get this far anyway. Do you know what I mean? It's so bad.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is that there's no... They both like this scene with Esther House and the blonde on the sofa. There's like extra footage of the two of them, the two incredibly terrible producers talking. And it's not like they stop and going, oh, they're corpsing in scenes, and then they kind of dry up with good versions of that. So they go, well, let's just bug in scenes we didn't put in the movie that they're not funny, they don't make any sense, but we'll put them in because we need to round out the fucking credit time. So there's like weird, like unfunny jokes that don't make it into the movie, but we stuck on the end. And at no point is there much in the way of like Arthur Hiller shot footage. Now, to be fair, I don't know. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know whether that's like because Joe Eszterhas probably didn't want to lose. Like, there's a bit where him and Arthur Hiller are actually talking at the end. So clearly didn't want to like piss Arthur Hiller off. So I don't know that he would have necessarily nicked his footage. To your point, though, like thinking about it, most of the movie is not directed. It's just blokes talking at a camera. There's no, you know what I mean? There's no art or and there's some bits where it's like, fucking hell, we can't just have a still camera looking at people. They don't even have like basic documentary stuff of like establishing shots or like cars moving across the street before you cut to an interview. Do you know what I mean? Like some way of having like, we've got to break up just looking at people talking into a camera. But there's no art. So instead they just like go, well, we can't do that. So what we'll do is we'll start shooting him over here and then we'll just pick the camera up while he's still talking and move it to the front of the desk and then like go. It's like completely pointless camera moves for the sake of we better have a moving camera instead of like it can't be that people just go outside and like shoot a bit of Hollywood Boulevard. Do you know what I mean? And then they nicked Die Hard with a Vengeance footage for the trailer. Did you notice that?
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
that was so weird. How did they get Die Hard with a Vengeance footage?
Synergy produced it.
Oh, so they owned that footage.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Synergy was a very short-lived production company that was eventually pulled into Disney, as everything is.
Did this sink it?
Yeah, this did, yeah. But
60 grand. 60 grand.
What?
Did you see that?
Oh, is
that's
what
how
it
much
made.
it made in the box office.
Yeah.
On a 10 million budget. 60 grand. Woo!
But this is the other interesting thing, right? Once you start delving into the producers on this movie, the director on the movie, the whatever, you start to see where the cast comes from. So Ryan O'Neal, for example, starred in Love Story, which was one of Arthur Hiller's biggest successes. Andrew G. Vanya, I think his name is, who's one of the producers behind Synergy Pictures. That was literally tanked after this movie. One of the first things him and Mario Casar produced was the Rambo series, First Blood and Rambo First Blood Part 2.
I'm starting to understand Stallone a bit more. That's fine.
Right, so that's where you get Stallone from, right? And then some of the other movies...
Stallone must be like, I don't want to alienate the bloke that owns Rambo. I might need that one day.
Right, exactly. And then you get the movies they made were Tombstone and Die Hard with a Vengeance, both of which I like. They also made Evita, but wasn't Evita a huge flop? Or was it a success? But then they made a string of box office bombs. Renaissance Man, Color of Night, Judge Dredd with Stallone again, The Scarlet Letter, Nixon, Shadow Conspiracy, Deep Rising, which is actually pretty good, but was a bomb. And then Alan Smithee, and that was the last one. It was dissolved after that, and the studio was then bought by Disney. But yeah, so there's sort of weird links, and also like Bruce Willis sent the script to this right off the bat, as did Schwarzenegger, both of whom had worked with the producers before, because the producers also made Total Recall and a bunch of other films.
And because they own a restaurant with Stallone, and Stallone's like, I'm going to the restaurant to shoot my scenes, why don't you come along?
Right, but once you start seeing this, like once you start seeing the producers, and then you think of the actors that were approached for it, and then you think of Planet Hollywood, and then you start to see that the tendrils don't reach very far. Like a lot of it is all kind of interwoven. But apparently, because Schwarzenegger was named in the original script. Originally, it was the three of them from Planet Hollywood who were named in the original script. And apparently Schwarzenegger got really, really angry that everyone else, because wait, am I mixing up stories right now? I don't know. Hang on a second. Am I mixing up stories?
Right, mate. Don't worry.
No, I was reading something today about a script that nobody wanted to touch, but the person believed in it so much that they shipped it out everywhere. I think it was this script. I think I'm almost certain that I was reading. Why would I be reading about anything other than this?
Good call.
This
Good
film. Call. Or was it the Eric Idle script that no one wanted to touch that I was also reading about? No, it was an Eric Idle script that nobody wanted to touch. But Schwarzenegger was meant to be in this film, and he did hate the fact that his name was checked in the script, and that's one of the reasons why he didn't do it. But no, it was an Eric Idle script. I was reading Eric Idle's blog on his website, because Eric Idle apparently has a blog on his website. And I was trying to find it.
2007, right?
Yeah, I was trying to dig deep into the Eric Idle well to see if there was anything, and apparently it's relatively shallow. But so it's just really like a puddle. But apparently there was some script that Don Simpson, who is another guy who's sort of name checked in this film, because Ryan O'Neal is meant to be a combination of Don Simpson and John Peters, but Eric Idle was meant to work with Don Simpson on a thing called the Rutland Isles. I don't even understand why Don Simpson would have read that and thought that was a good idea, but it does show one thing, and I think this is imperative as we go into the Eric Idle season, the very bad Eric Idle season.
We need to focus more on Idle and not on the black horror of Hollywood that this movie unwittingly exposed by thinking it was being funny.
But what's interesting about it, and what's interesting about the Don Simpson story, and why I'm glad it came up in my subconscious while I was confusing it with this film, is that we can't underestimate, as we talk about Idle in Hollywood and post-Python in general in Hollywood. And I think, I don't know whether you've experienced this, but I've certainly experienced a little bit of it. There is an odd fascination that Americans have with Brits. Yes, there's a fascination with Monty Python because it was not inexplicably popular over here, but it's kind of weird how popular Python is and was over here. But not only that, but there is a weird fascination still to this day, even though our countries have been so intrinsically linked for decades. You'd think they would have got over it. There is a weird fascination with Brits in America and British stuff. And I even saw it like when I first moved here, at the time that something like the new Doctor Who and Downton Abbey was becoming inexplicably popular over here, and then The Crown is very popular right now, and all this sort of stuff. Like Netflix is the Great British Baking Show, whatever it is. There's this like endless fascination with the way Brits do stuff, or the way Brits say stuff. And seemingly, from some of the stories that I read in trying to get a handle on just what Idle was doing between 1978 and 2000 and whatever, whenever he did Spamalot, which was sort of the next thing he did that was sort of popular or interesting at all. But everything between Python and Spamalot, what exactly he was doing, a lot of what I turned up was this idea that, oh, let's take a meeting with Idol. If nothing else, we get to say that either we hung out with someone from Monty Python or we got to hang out with like a witty Brit who wrote like a witty Brit script kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? There isn't like a sentence I can really explain what I mean. But the fact that him and Don Simpson worked like coke snorting, fast car driving, dead really young, friends with Tom Cruise, Don Simpson, like the embodiment of the 80s excessive American action film producer Don Simpson, spent 3 years working on initially what was going to be a TV script, but ended up being molded down into a film script called The Rutland Isles, right? Because Eric Idle hasn't mined the name Rutland and its derivatives enough. But they worked 3 years on a script about the Rutland Isles, and tried lots of different plot points and and this is, by the way, Eric Idle is saying this. This isn't me making this up or speculating. Like, this is on Eric Idle's site. That says something to me about the idea of them American producers trying desperately to mine whatever that Britishness is that Americans generally find appealing. And from all indications, there has never really been a successful mining of it. Britain occasionally produces stuff, normally like, once every decade, once every other decade, that catches on over here. And then years go by where nothing catches on. You know what I mean? That's seemingly the pattern. And it doesn't matter how many times they've tried to be like, hey, maybe we get the Python guys to do something. Or like Lenny Henry came over here to try and have a career and made one movie and failed. Like, the only thing Rowan Atkinson has done over here that has been successful is characters he was doing in the UK anyway, which is Bean and Johnny English. Like, there's every time they've tried to do anything with Steve Coogan where he's like the lead role and it's an American movie, has been pish. Like, they just, whatever it is, they just don't seem to be able to. Now, we can go away in England, like Steve Coogan could go away and make The Trip or whatever, and it's then weirdly successful on Netflix, even though, to me, that seems like the least obvious thing that's going to be successful is two guys doing impressions of 70s actors in a restaurant in Greece.
No, I agree.
So that's what I mean.
You could argue that it's in Hollywood's nature, right, to take something that does well and then go, okay, well, that's got buzz, but all we know how to do is feed it into the machine. Like, we don't, and I don't think it's as cynical as like, oh, I mean, I'm sure people do say things like, oh, they won't get this or they won't get that, or, people aren't going to respond to whatever, and their instincts start taking over. But it's really, you're just feeding into the machine, and the machine is, right, the more I learn about working in the entertainment business, it's that so much of it is just like gut calls from like people who are paid lots of money, right? Yeah. It's not, no matter how much they might go like, give me numbers and give me data and, and Google and all that bollocks. But when it comes to entertainment, it's pure gut calls. So what happens, you go, well, this is good. This is popular. Steve Coogan, he's good. He's popular. Let's put him in a movie. And then at that point, when he gets fed into the machine, it's a bunch of like coked up, black-hearted, rapists, I guess, who go, well, my gut instinct says, like, it needs to be this, and this is what's funny. And, like, that's, I think, is what is probably interesting about the movie, is that it's, like, what producers think is funny. Do you know what I mean? It's not... Any good comedy, I suppose, if you're a good comedy producer, which I suspect is very different from anything else, being a good comedy producer, is probably knowing when to, like... I expect being a good comedy movie producer is like hire good actors and good directors and good writers, and make sure the chemistry is there between people, right? That's probably more important than anything. And it's probably a subtle blend of leave them alone while at the same time make sure they're actually making a movie. They're not farting around or like giving themselves heart attacks from like taking too much cocaine or whatever, right? But something where they're like kind of like Lorne Michaels is like leave them alone while at the same time make them realize that if they don't do it on time and on budget, they're all dead. Right, that's kind of like the subtle blend of father figure with love, but also, you know, a big stick. Whereas for an action movie producer, it's much more like I'm going to storm onto the set, punch the director in the face, take over the cut of the film, and put more explosions in it because that will make us the $5 million we need to, you know, break even. Right, because that is, I've no doubt that is definitely true. That there are movies, and we've watched enough movies where what was absolutely needed was a coked-up producer to walk onto the set, punch the director in the face, and add more explosions, right? That was what the movie needed, right? So there's no doubt that that is required in certain films where nobody gives a shit about story, nobody gives a shit about anything except, is it exciting? Am I having a good time, right? That's what they care about. But you put those cunts in charge of a comedy, and you get this. It's like, no. Comedy reveals things. You don't want people to see inside you. You don't want to see what's you don't want people to see what's inside you because it is bad. Well, I mean, you are going to hell for what you keep inside yourself. It makes lots of people lots of money, right? I've got no doubt about that. But you are going to hell. It's not even that, like the way Esther House, like I'm just going to, listen, Esther House is owned this movie, says he produced it, says he edited it, says this is his cut, says he wrote it. So I'm laying the blame firmly at him. He writes it, if we're to believe that everything that people say in this movie isn't just wildly ad-libbed after taking a copious amount of drugs by people who are not funny. If he wrote it in such a way as, you know, as to be a completely blunt edge. Like there's no, you know, comedy either relies on, you know, the surreality of something coming out of left field that you're like, that doesn't fit in that person's mouth and therefore that's funny, or it relies on like wanton exaggeration of a situation that we all know very well, but here's a heightened, exaggerated version of it that's funny. And that's a very simplistic example, you know what I mean. In this movie, it's just, hey, I'm Ryan O'Neal. I'm playing a film producer. I'm a horrible, horrible dick. Hey, here's another scene where I'm Ryan O'Neal playing a producer. I'm a horrible, horrible dick. Like, there's no jokes. It's just, I'm a producer and I'm a horrible dick. And Esther House might think he's exaggerating something, but he's not. He's either not exaggerated it enough because it rings too true. Right. Or, like we say, he's just not a funny writer because there isn't anything in this movie that doesn't, like, ring true. Like, it all weirdly and freakishly rings true. I think the thing as well that's most puzzling, and at the same time you're right in terms of how it rings true, is that this is all happening over what is obviously like a crap piece of shit action film. Right? It's like a $40 million B movie action film with like Whoopi Goldberg, Jackie Chan, and like I guess if you just about maybe the idea of Stallone, Willis, and Schwarzenegger in the same movie is like maybe that's something. But even so, it was when the thing that is like when Eric Idle comes out, like the only bit that's like actually on a film set in the whole movie, which again is also weird. It's a movie about a movie and no one shoots anything out of it. When he comes out and he goes, no, they go like, oh, yeah, I think we got it. And Eric goes, no, I think we can do it better, right? And the scene is them, like, doing their trailer bit where they just turn around with a gun and fire at the camera, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, or whatever the fuck it is. I can't even remember. I blocked out. I think that's basically what happens, right?
No, it says, I don't take no shit or something 3 times, and then they all go together, we don't take no shit, and then fire at the camera or something.
I thought it was I didn't give a fuck or fuck you, or maybe okay, either way.
Either way, it would never show up in a trailer. You would never have a trailer that had those words in it. Period.
No. Well, this is also true, but also it's not realistic because at the end of that, They go, oh yeah, we got the scene, we got it great. We're never going to do it better now. Gary Lyle's like, no, I think we can do it better. They go, do what? That's not a scene. People turning around and saying a line to a camera and firing a gun in a kind of like I'm in a cool movie way. There's no scene here. Wait, what led up to this? What's the scene after it? Like, there's why is Idol not impressed? What could be done better? I mean, like, this makes. I know that none of the film makes sense, but that particular part is so. You're basing your whole film. Forget everything else. Forget the fact that it's a black-hearted monstrosity of a mirror to monsters. Right? It's supposed to be about a film about a guy that risks his sanity and his career to salvage what he believes is his vision of a good movie, right? And it's based on, that's the only bit of the movie we see is him going, we can do it better. When all that happens, they turn around, fire a gun at the camera and say, we don't give a shit, right? That's it. So why are you going to, like, why is Idol not going, Idol the director, or Smithee or whatever, going, well, this is the movie, it's shit, there's nothing that could be better about it, so why is the final cut? Well,
because there's also, but the main thing being is the idea behind the movie, the plot you so eloquently described a while ago, right? Which is a quasi-interesting thing that a movie could be written about. Like, it is a nice circular plot, whatever, right? This movie is all the things you don't want to see about that plot. And all the things you would like to see, right, about that plot, you never get to see. Like, a mockumentary is absolutely the worst way to have done that plot. Like, it just, even everything about the production of this movie doesn't make any sense. You have all those producers and all those directors and all those actors presumably on the set of Burn Hollywood Burn, and they can't even agree what a parody trailer would look like. Like, they can't even film a parody trailer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, even the guy who made Home Alone could do a parody film noir scene just about believably. Like, and all these people on set, Robert Evans on down, like every single one of them, they're either high-powered producers, high-powered writers, high-powered actors, and a few directors kicking about this movie, right? And they can't even parody a 30-second trailer without A, using Die Hard with a Vengeance footage, and B, just having two big action stars and Whoopi Goldberg turning to the camera.
Oh yeah, because they talk about it was critic proof. Everybody loved it, and it's called Trio, and it's about 3 cops and some exploding bits of. Anyway, but you're
not only
right.
that, but not only that, but the thing that urinates over all of it, like the thing that could have redeemed it even a smidge, would have been when, at the end of it, Eric Idle gets the chance to be redeemed and make the movie he wants to make. He decides to make Duo and to take his hospital orderlies along with him to be assistant directors. So I'm like, wait a minute. The whole joke throughout the movie, or the whole crux of the movie, was that this guy had so much integrity. Integrity? What am I saying?
Integrity. Yeah, you're saying it right, yeah.
Am I? Is it one of those words that is now integrity? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Oh, it sounds so weird to me. That this guy has so much integrity that he burns his film, right? Because he doesn't believe in it at all, right? And he never really wanted to be making like Trio, but decided to make it anyway. But when he gets the chance to be redeemed, he decides to make a movie called Duo and make his hospital orderlies assistant directors. And it's like, so that, even that, like, I know you've put it in as a joke, like Trio, Duo, it's hilarious. I know you've put that in as a joke, Esther House, you fraud, but it doesn't work because the whole crux of your entire film, and I know I'm ridiculous looking for a crux in, it's almost like
right. Because they made it, and that's what I'm saying about that. It's that he's a bad writer, and I would be stunned if his stuff hasn't been, because he definitely has good ideas, and he's got like the big twist in Jagged Edge. But like Jagged Edge is like, these are movies that used to be made in Hollywood, right? Where Jagged Edge is the twist. Like that was what was pitched. It wasn't like someone was reading through it going, oh, I see, it's like a courtroom drama. But, oh my God, the ending. Oh, it's like someone went, this is the thing. It's a courtroom drama, and the twist is he did it. Like that's the fucking twist, right? And you go, great, here's 20 million and Jeff Bridges, go and make that movie, right? And then Joe Eszterhas like tossed off some bag of shit. And then it got given to the usual script doctors, right? Who like wrapped it up, gave it like character and beats and motivations and all the things that a movie fucking needs. But really, Eszterhas is like, it's a courtroom drama where all
of his stuff is based on either Hitchcock or film noir or whatever. Like Basic Instinct is just a detective film with tits. Like that's all it is. Like it's just.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But that's what he'll do, right? He's like, it's and
that's how he pitched it. By the way, he pitched Basic Instinct.
The detective falls in love with the main suspect because everybody knows that. But the twist is. The main suspect is fucking everybody. That's the twist, right? But that's how I'm saying. What I'm saying is he sells his movies not on the basis of an actual script.
No,
right?
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
He really can't write. Right. But what he can do is come up with an idea that over lunch with Robert Evans, he goes, this is my idea for a movie. And they go, that's a brilliant idea for a movie. You should make that. Here's $20 million and Michael Douglas, right? Or whatever, right? That's because all the things you're talking about are so basic, like that if you gave, not that if you gave a shit, but if you accidentally had talent, you know what I mean? If you fell over
and had talent,
and when you stood up again, some talent had like stuck to the bottom of your shoe, you would know that if the movie is about a guy who burns his film on the basis of he needs it to be better or he wants to be making a better movie, if he's given his dream at the end, he doesn't then go and make like a lesser version of the same film. Right. It just doesn't make any sense. He hasn't. That's what I'm saying. It's like everything about it is cheap and easy and like might have been quite funny at the time, maybe while they were on set, but there's no heart or truth.
No, and it's
like warmth or humanity to any of it. It's just a terrible SNL sketch from like those lost years where there's like briefly you watch an SNL sketch, you go, wow, it's not funny. Nobody funny is in this sketch. Like they've got all the unfunny cast members on at the same time and they're on a losing idea and they're just eating up time. Yeah. It's like a whole movie of that sketch. That's what this is.
I mean, and it it's one step away from making like horrible gang rape jokes and then having a bunch of like white guys standing around in a circle laughing at the gang rape joke. Like it's one step away from doing comedy like that. Like that's how bad it is. Like it's horribly misogynistic and sexist. Like horror. It has zero time for anything but itself. It's incredibly fixated on itself, and on the men. And on the powerful white men. And it might think it's satirizing the powerful white men because like occasionally it makes a joke in the captions about, whatever, he's an asshole or whatever. But like it's not. Like Eszterhas wants to be hanging out with the characters that Richard Jenny and Ryan O'Neal are playing. He doesn't despise those people. Like he needs those people.
Cool and funny.
He has
cool and funny.
He has a career because of those people. He has a career because of people who have literally raped and or emotionally raped
you don't watch
women.
Harvey Weinstein in your movie in a comic cameo unless you're a fucking arse. Like just like you're saying, he's not satirizing these people. He's like kissing their ass. He's sucking up to them. It admires these people. It's that thing of like, they get things done. They're funny. They're larger than life. They're going to pull a gun in a meeting and just like awful people that are that thing of like, they're larger than life. They get shit done. It's that like just that nasty fucking thing of Hollywood that Hollywood's always had that like a black heart. because it is about like money is more important than anything else, and art. The thing about Hollywood, right, is art is more important. Money is more important than anything else. But the only way to make money is to kind of drag art out of people. And sometimes the only way to make art, like good art, is to just destroy people from the inside. Like that's the only way you're going to get people to, act the way you need them to act, or direct the way you need them to direct, like to take people to the very edge of themselves. And if that involves chewing them up, spitting them out, and then forgetting about them, as long as you're making enough money out of it, then Hollywood will absolutely do that. And it will cover up whatever it needs to cover up. And it will, I've got no doubt that like the worst crimes you could possibly imagine have been committed in the name of, I can do what I want because if I'm a producer, I can, do what the fuck I want with just people. People are just playthings for me to make money with.
And it was weird because as I say, I've been doing a lot of reading of Eric Idle interviews and watching Eric Idle interviews and stuff like that lately. How do you think he fits into this? Like, how do you think? Do you think that? So I want to get onto that
Hollywood like star fucker thing. Like he just wants to be in Hollywood. He wants to be famous.
No,
he wants to be hanging out at Joe Eszterhas's pool. Right?
No. I have a thing about that, but we'll come back to it. But like in one of the interviews, I think Eric Idle said, maybe even been around this movie, but it's like a lot of people want Hollywood to be a place where like people go and make art. But if you want to go make art, go to like France or Germany. That's where they'll pay you to like make art films. Hollywood is Detroit, right? And we've heard this before. Like you can't have show business without business, right? But it's not like Detroit. It's like Detroit if Detroit was run by, people worse than the mafia. Like if Detroit was run by, big fat gelatin rapists and murderers.
Well, I think the problem is, right? I think
because that's what it's like. That's what this movie says, and it rings horribly true.
But the problem is, right, and the reason they get away with it, when you think about it, is that because it's based on instinct, right? Because it's not about numbers or data or put X actor in X movie with X director with X script and you'll get a hit, right? It's all like nebulous. It's like instincts and connections and greasing the media and like all these like weird skills, right? That are all based on personality, right? It's all about like, for whatever reason, this producer has the magic touch, right? He can put the right people in the right movies, and it's this guy's instincts that make, $500 million. Like that's what makes it. It's not the script, it's not the star, it's this bloke and his instincts, which means his personality and the things that he wants and the things that like unfettered ego, whatever that achieves, that's what makes the money. So he's allowed to do whatever he wants, right? The producer, because that is what makes him the money. His personality is what makes the money. So you can't cage that. Like Don Simpson and the gun or whatever. That's like part of what makes him who he is. Therefore, that's part of what makes the money. So you don't fuck with that.
We interrupt the After Movie Diner to have one of those adverts that I have to insert into the podcast in order to stay on Spreaker with the current setup that I have. I should have been doing this all along. I do try and place the ads at a point during the show where they hopefully work and break up the dialogue a little bit. But I do know that it's annoying for people, and I do apologize. But please, this does keep the content for you at least free. So please do just put up with this advert, and I'll try and be better about sort of cutting into the show at a point that makes sense and playing an advert. Anyway, here's an annoying fucking advert that you have to listen to keep the podcast free. I apologize. It is the nature of the beast. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back shortly after this and possibly these annoying adverts. I don't know how many they're going to play. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. As a Python fan, right, as someone who, through their life, has loved the Pythons so much that you collected everything they ever did, regardless of quality, on the basis of it was an act of love, right? A token of love that to own, the odd job and love and a cello, right? It was about
romance and a double bass.
It's almost Pavlovian at this point.
It's
the
based...
you go rubbing a cello, so you go romance and a double bass.
It's based on a Chekhov story.
So back to the Chekhov. What I'm saying is, those things were... It wasn't like irony or like a weird... like collector's instinct. It was love, right? It's like, I bet it was a weird... One of those things was, I bet there's 5 seconds of something good in here, and 5 seconds.
No, you're giving me too much credit. You're giving me too much credit.
No,
you do. Hang on a
5 seconds of good Python is worth anybody's money, right? That's where it came from.
I have a weird collector's instinct. I still do. Like, I have a weird thing where, like, Bruce Campbell was the thing as well. Like, when Bruce Campbell was the thing, it was like, I have to own absolutely everything Bruce Campbell has been in. I even went as far as to buy, like, box sets of stuff because he stars in one episode of... Like, I bought X-Files Season 5, or whatever it was, the whole series, because he's in 1 episode. 7, or whatever. So... I have a weird collector's instinct, like, and that hasn't gone away.
But nonetheless, the point being that you wanted to own that, like, you knew that for 5 seconds Campbell would make a face or say a line, and it would make the whole episode worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, I was genuinely interested in what, you can't, like, I loved all 4 seasons of Python, all of their albums, and their 3 movies, 4 if you count the live show, right? 4 if you count, and now something completely different, 5 if you count the live show. And I liked all that they had put out, right? And then I liked Fawlty Towers, I liked most of Ripping Yarns, and I liked some of Rutland Weekend Television. So
Nuns on the Run?
Nuns on the Run, although if you go back and watch it now, no.
Really?
Yeah, really. It's like, it's such an obvious Some Like It Hot ripoff. It's like watching it without knowing what Some Like It Hot is, it's fine, but like, watching it now, it's just like an unfunny, pervy Some Like It Hot with nuns. But there was a certain thing, certainly up until the 80s, where I was like, I am fascinated by everything that came out. I'm also fascinated by the fact that, like, Python was so big for the 70s and 80s, and yet everything else that they did, they did in a cupboard for threepence, you know what I mean? Like, outside of the Python films, the film career that Cleese had up until Fish Called Wanda was, movies made in a barn somewhere for 5p and a packet of Love Hearts. Like, it wasn't... even though they had reached such great heights with Python and they had become, like, this quantifiable entity, the only person who could even be described as having anything close to an A-list career was Terry Gilliam. And he, like, even the stuff that Palin did that was, like, legitimately good was, like, Alan Bennett films that were, filmed out the back of a butcher's in Yorkshire. Like, and none of them now, even when you go back to it now, like, none of them now would be on your top 10 best British films ever made. Not even probably 10 best British comedies ever made. I mean the non-Python films. I mean, like, Clockwise or,
Well, they probably wouldn't even get on the top 100.
The Missionary or whatever. Because most people nowadays wouldn't know about them. You know what I mean? They know about Fish Called Wanda, they know about the Python movies, but... I mean, I don't know anyone apart from me who has seen The Missionary more than once. I don't know anyone but me who has seen American Friends. Terry Jones's, like, Personal Services, I think, was a mild hit, but, like, his other stuff, Eric the Viking, whatever, people may have heard of it, but it certainly hasn't lived on. You know what I mean? Outside of the Python connection. So. I'm fascinated, but I was definitely fascinated by that. Like, there was definitely an idea of, like, there must be something out there that like has some work. You can't make Python and then everything else you do be
particularly
awful.
It was, even though they were in the group and they obviously kept each other going, it was still, like, quite individual sketches, right? A lot of Idol stuff particularly was written on his own, basically, right? I mean, I know he had to, like, perform it for others and use other people and probably get, they polish it up a little bit, but still, and then Palin and Jones and Chapman and Cleese and whatnot, but you still get the feeling that Cleese probably wrote a lot of his own stuff, and, like, Chapman presumably was probably too pissed half the time to contribute to the writing all that much.
Yeah, no, so...
I'm sure Terry Jones is mostly like, what about if I get nude? All right, can we just get to the end of the sketch and then we can talk about you getting nude, right? I think it's probably Palin, Cleese and Idle were the main drivers of the writing, I would think.
Right. And so there is a whole fascination with post-Python stuff. I think the thing with Eric Idle, which is interesting about Burn Hollywood Burn, all the other things he's done where he could be accused of being a star fucker, so hanging out with George Harrison, hanging out with Robin Williams, hanging out with Billy Connolly, hanging out with Gary Shandling, hanging out with Tom Hanks and Carrie Fisher or whatever, all seem to be like genuine friendships. Like anything I've ever read or seen or whatever, even though they've shown up in each other's stuff and they've done each other favors and stuff, like they all seem genuine things. It's not like, Harrison and Idle were like at each other's houses all the time. They went on vacation with each other. They knew each other's families. Like this wasn't just give me a few bob for life of Brian Harrison and then fuck off. Like this was a friendship, right? The same can be said for like Robin Williams, who he was a very close friend with for years and years and years, and was intimately affected by his suicide to all intents and purposes. And again, look, I admit he could be lying through his teeth, but it would take some lying to show up. And even in the documentaries about Robin Williams or about Eric Idle and Robin Williams, there's photographs of them hanging out. There's photographs of them hanging out with Billy Connolly and attending the Highland Games.
To be fair, even when you say all that stuff, it's like he's not hanging out with McCartney and
no, he's hanging out with the groovy, shabby, quirky.
Yeah, like people that I would want to hang out with, Harrison and fucking Billy Connolly, and
right.
I mean Robin Williams would probably get quite annoying, but still, like I can understand those aren't like the biggest stars in Hollywood.
No, but I'm saying that
they're all excellent at what they do.
His friendships with those people are well documented, and if you've watched things like he made a sequel to the Rutles by himself for $5 and a camcorder, and it's basically him going to like Tom Hanks's house or Carrie Fisher's house or Gary Shandling's house and sort of telling them what to say and whatever, and then stealing Neil Innes's music and playing it over. I'm not even kidding. Stealing Neil Innes's music and playing it over the top of stuff without giving Innes any credit. But outside of that, like that side of him feels fairly genuine. I think that the fact that he showed up in Casper and Mum and Dad Save the World and this movie and a couple of others, that yeah, he's probably also attended those Hollywood parties where they're like, oh, let's invite Eric Idle. He'll tell a funny joke about a time that John Cleese fell over or something like that. And we'll stick him by the swimming pool, and him and his wife will like drink sherries and tell people stories about what it was like to, I don't know, see Palin's Willie or whatever. Like, I don't know. Like, I can imagine him being the token Brit at a Hollywood party to be like a bon vivant kind of thing. I also see that happening, but I also don't see him doing that for too long either. And I certainly don't see that that's why he's in this movie. The weird thing about this movie in particular is that there is a quote from Idle when he's talking about the script with Arthur Hiller, and he's talking about filming this movie, and this adds an extra dark layer to it, but he was filming this movie while his mum was dying. So they brought his mum out to LA to live in like Idle's house as sort of a convalescent home / sanatorium / die in the sunshine mum kind of thing, right? While he was making this movie. And what he liked about the direction Arthur Hiller was taking, apparently, was that there was going to be a lot of emotional stuff to kind of counteract some of the more wacky comedy. This is what Idle says. And he liked it because he doesn't normally think of himself as an actor. He normally thinks of himself as someone who puts on wigs and mustaches and does a silly voice and then whatever. And he thought that there were some scenes in this movie where he could really, coupled with the fact that his mum's death was looming over his head, that he could actually emote and be effective and whatever. And the weird thing is, if you watch the scenes in this movie that are Idle scenes that play out a little bit, that have some meat on them, and there aren't many, but like if you watch them, his performance is by far the best in the movie. And I'm not that's not saying anything. That's like saying, if I showed up at a school nativity, my performance would be in the best in the school nativity. But what I mean is, reading Idle statements about the movie I signed on to do from Arthur Hiller had like depth and change and different scenes and, you know, some comedy and blah, 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 rings true with some of the performances that he gives in the film. Not every performance, but some of the performance that he gives in the film. And that's the only thing that I could tangentially find that actually rang a little true and made a little sense to me. I still don't understand how there was a script that Idle and Hiller signed on for that then became this film, unless Esther House literally spliced together either the worst takes and or, you know, cutting room floor footage and was like, no, it should have more Ryan O'Neal in it.
It feels like, I guess what could have happened, so it's two things I want to say. Remind me, I want to go back to the Idol thing, because it reminded me of something that I remember Robbie Coltrane talking about Nuns on the Run. But I wonder, in terms of speculation is what you need, I wonder if the documentary parts were meant to be like a framing device, right? Let's say that there is like a script that Hiller and Idle signed on for, and there's more drama and there's more, you know, there's more heart, and there's something there for people to sign on for. And in between that is like framing devices of Stallone and Goldberg or whatever, and they're, you know, and there's like, you know, there's like the Hollywood perspective of like these big stars and what they thought was going on, the producers. And then in between that is like this actual human story happening about this guy trying to get his film back, right? And then they, for whatever reason, Esther House in the studio look at it and go, well, it's just, it doesn't work. It's shit. It's not funny. It's boring. We hate it. If I was Esther House and a studio was holding a gun to my head saying, fix this, it's all shit, right? It's no good. The only thing I would be able to do to fix it would be, well, if I keep the interview bits, right? I can't get rid of it. There's two bits of the movie, right? There's the story about the guy and the interview bits. If they hate it, I can't rip out the interview bits and like film more drama. There's not enough money. There's no money, right? Just as you say, there's no money. So all I can do is rip out the drama bits and make it entirely a mockumentary, entirely like a Spinal Tap or something, where it's just people talking to the camera, because that will take me a week to shoot and cost no money, and we'll be able to salvage something out of this like dumpster fire. That's the only thing I can think of. That's the only thing that makes sense and does chime with what you're saying, because the thing I was remembering about Nuns on the Run was Robbie Coltrane was saying, and I'm assuming Nuns on the Run is before this, right? I'm guessing it must be. This is 1970, yes. And I feel like Nuns on the Run is like 89, 90.
Yeah.
Yeah. Robbie Coltrane was saying that Eric Idle hadn't done anything in a long time when they made Nuns on the Run, and they had to like coax him out of his shell a little bit. He was very shy and very uncertain of his own abilities, and you know, it had been such a long time since he'd been in front of the camera, so they had to, you know, and then by the end of it he was having a great time and we made a great movie and hooray, right? But that idea of Eric Idle turning up in Nuns on the Run, and I feel like he was like the movie was supposed to be for other people. Like it was supposed to be for like Palin and Cleese or Palin and Coltrane or something, right? It was supposed to be like because it's clearly like a double act movie, right? And Robbie Coltrane and Eric Idle feels like an odd choice of a double act there, and I can see how they might have.
Well, wasn't it meant to be Idle and Palin? And Palin,
maybe that was it.
And Palin,
maybe that was that.
Palin didn't want to do it, and Coltrane stepped in for Palin, I thought.
Oh, that could be right. It could be right. But I just remember Coltrane telling that story. And maybe it's bollocks or exaggerated, but clearly there's some, you know, even if it's exaggerated, there's clearly some truth there that he's obviously not, you know, anybody that's going to behave like that on set and is kind of like needs to be, you know, given a little bit of a confidence boost about being in a movie for the first time in ages. And why would anybody want to see me, especially in a lead? There's some comfort in being. I'm just like, I turn up, I play a twit for 10 minutes. They give me enough, you know, to live and eat for a year. And then I go back to my parties, right? And stealing Neil Innes songs. I can see how that's not quite the image when you look at his career.
What is incredible is that Sylvester Stallone made this after Copland. And like Copland is his greatest work, and this is by far his least great work. But my favorite bit in the whole movie, if I had to pick a favorite bit, is a Stallone bit. It's the bit where, and it's clearly a real bit. Like, it's clearly not a joke. He's playing pool, or they've decided to film him, like, playing pool. And he goes to hit, like, the pool cue, the pool ball with the pool cue, and just completely, like, slices it. Like, has no idea, like, what he's doing with the pool table. And he, like, throws the pool cue onto the table. He's like, I hate this bloody game, or whatever he says. And I'm like, that was my favourite bit, because it was the only real bit in the whole movie where Stallone's just like, I don't like pool. Why have you got me playing pool? It was, like, my favourite bit. I'm like, can't I just have a movie that's that?
There's another bit at the end where he's, like, yelling at somebody behind the bar, like, how are those shirts selling with my picture on them? Like, he's, like, done a painting, one of his paintings or whatever, it's on a T-shirt, and he wants to know, like, in the middle of shooting, how they're selling. I guess they went and sell them or whatever. And he's like, oh, and it's just like a weird, like, you've gone to visit Stallone in a bar, and he's yelling at somebody about how those, because I can see how Stallone was every like, he'd done a painting and something, and he's like, we'll put out a T-shirt, and they're like, all right, I guess that's an idea that we'll do.
I can never forgive Burn Hollywood Burn. I mean, it is just such
I don't think I would ever look at
atrocious.
anybody that was in this movie the same way again.
No. But for our first Eric Idle thing, it kicks up so many conundrums.
I will say, though, I feel like I've come out of it with more... Like, having finished watching the movie, I didn't feel like I had anything nice to say about Idle. But I feel like you've won me round to this lonesome expat figure drifting at the outskirts of Hollywood parties, called upon to drink sherry and do a funny voice while aching inside to create art. And when given the chance, not only does the art not happen, but he finds himself in one of the worst films ever made, reflecting the very evil black-heartedness that he feels his soul is being corroded by every day that he lives in Hollywood, despite wonderful things in it.
But I will give you the flip side to Idle. Out of all of the Pythons, he is the only one... Yeah. Well, he's certainly the great, but he's the only one who has, until late, where Cleese has just completely, shit over any kind of shred of decency or dignity the man had. But Idle is the only Python who has fully milked Python, so or any of his things. So he does Python and Rutland Weekend Television, right? The other big thing that he's done outside of Python is the Rutles, based on Neil Innes's music and Rutland Weekend Television, and Spamalot, based on other people's scripts and Neil Innes's music and Idle's music. But, like, ultimately, then he did Not the Messiah is a Very Naughty Boy, so then he milked Life of Brian, right? And he's even toured as... Eric Idle exploits Monty Python, doing Monty Python songs that other people have written and performing sketches from Monty Python that other people had written and various other things. So of all the Pythons, while there'll always be Pythons and they'll always be judged against Python, he's the only one who has continued to do Python stuff. He pushed for the O2 shows, he produced and directed the O2 shows, etc. Interestingly enough, every time they tried to have like a reunion at the 20th anniversary and at the 30th anniversary, where there was talk of them like doing new sketches or whatever, he won't do it. He won't, like, he didn't show up for the 30th anniversary, he didn't show up for the 20th anniversary, outside of like being filmed for interviews and talking interestingly from his Hollywood home about like how it was fun to write the Penis song. But outside of that, like, he won't show up and do anything else with the other Pythons, except for when, like, the O2 show came along and they had to, like, recoup some money that they had to pay a producer on Holy Grail. And he was like, oh, we need to earn some money? Fine, I'll come along to do the show. Interestingly enough, all other times that he's been asked on chat shows for decades about, like, when's Python going to reform, he's always the guy to say, oh, yeah, I was speaking to people in Vegas, I was speaking to people in Hollywood, I was speaking to people in New York, da-da-da-da-da. Lots of promoters wanted Python to get back together, but Palin always said no. So what's interesting about that is that Palin won't get together for just any old thing, like just to make money, right? Which is what Idol wants to do. Idol wants to go out on the road and for $10 million rehash a bunch of old sketches, not have to write anything new or think of anything new, and then go home again. Palin doesn't want to do that. However, Palin will show up if it's a Python anniversary and they're saying, let's do a few sketches in a studio in BBC Two, which they did for their 30th anniversary. Because he's like, well, that's new. That's something new, and it's for a specific reason, and it's in a shed in BBC Two. It's not for millions of dollars. I'm doing it for the comedy of it or for the nostalgia of it. I'm not doing it for the money, until the O2 show came along. But all Eric Idle has tried to do, all through the 80s and 90s, and I've watched plenty of interviews with him, is find ways to make money off not having to do very much except rehash Python stuff. And it wasn't till Spamalot that he was like, oh, great, if Mel Brooks is doing it with the producers and Young Frankenstein and whatever, I'll do it with Holy Grail. All the Pythons are either in such financial states or in such jaded situations in their life that they'll let me have the film right, or they'll let me have the rights to the scripts. Because I never forget going to see Spamalot in the West End and being like, I know who wrote all these sketches, and 90% of it wasn't Idol. And so, then they have him coming on doing the Sir Robin song written by Neil Innes, and then the Monk's Chants written by Neil Innes. And do you know who didn't make any money off Spamalot or the Rutles? Neil Innes, even though arguably the Rutles is like doesn't work without Neil Innes, you know. And so yeah, it's he's
a complicated character. Is what you're saying.
He is a complicated character because on one hand, when you listen to his autobiography, as I have done on tape or whatever, and he's telling you the stories of his life, you're like, oh, he seems nice, and yeah, he's hanging out with Billy Connolly, and Billy Connolly seems like a nice chap, and he's hanging out with George Harrison, and George Harrison seems like a nice chap, and yeah, he seems like the hippie, you know, liberal, nice chap, cheeky chappy kind of Idol. He seems nice. And on the other hand, his career path has been like, how can I make money out of something I wrote 20 years ago? So
I want to make money, but I don't want to do anything new. I don't want to fail. I suppose because at a certain point, being sympathetic to somebody who is clearly a thief is that I don't trust myself. I don't trust, like, let's do something new. And his attitude is, I don't trust myself to do something new. I might torpedo my legacy and then I'll be fucked. What I do trust is if I keep rehashing nudge, nudge, they'll pay me enough money that I can, you know, keep my swimming pools, right? My 8 swimming pools or however many swimming pools he owns, but it's a lot. Right?
Eric, 8 pools idle.
8 swimming pools idle. There's definitely there's a certain like cold-eyed business sense in, if I keep rehashing things, I will keep making X amount of dollars a year, and therefore I will not starve. If I try and do something new and it fails, I might torpedo my chances of ever like rehashing Gubbins again, and I might not have enough money to see me through to like getting my head in a fridge, which is my like ultimate dream, right? Preferably in a swimming pool, like in the middle of a swimming pool of ice, my head frozen, ready to be rethawed and stuck on a robot in the future, where I will perform nudge nudge for oil or whatever. That's his plan and his scheme, and it's sort of difficult, like, without passion or joy or love, right, in your heart, with just like, what do I need to keep being alive? What are my chances here? I can kind of sympathize. I can sympathize with his approach, because it's all very well you're Michael Palin and like, well, I guess I'll just get on a balloon and then I'll be able to keep myself in
I'll get on a balloon.
Like comfortable armchairs and leafy North London suburbs for the rest of my days, right? Like, that's all Palin is. He's just pottering around in a fucking cottage, right? That even that looks like, oh, what a quaint cottage. Like, yeah, it costs like $8 million because it's in fucking Highgate.
Do you know what Palin did? This is absolutely true. This is how little Palin like dreamed of. He bought a flat in a certain part of London. I think you're right, like North London, leafy suburbs. I think Highgate, somewhere near there, right? when he was doing Python and ripping yarns or whatever, like with some money, he bought the thing with his wife, who he's been married to for his entire life. They were like childhood sweethearts or whatever. And as other floors or buildings next to it became available, he just bought a couple more of those buildings and just made his flat a little bigger. Like that's what he's done. And he lived for the longest time like round the corner from Terry Gilliam and round the corner from Terry Jones, and they'd all go and have like frothy, nutty pints of ale in like a local North London pub.
That's exactly. And the thing is, right, he's done enough balloon rides now that he can do that for one night. And Idle sitting there going, "Look, listen, mate, if balloon rides fell in my lap, right, it's like, hello, we're the BBC, we'll pay you to like fly around the world, and then you can write a book about it or something." Yeah, okay, great, brilliant. Do that every 5 years, and you'll become a national treasure. Like, okay, right? Don't get me wrong, I love Round the World Day. It's a brilliant bit of television. But there was total accident. It was supposed to be somebody else, and they had to like draft in Payne at the last minute. It wasn't supposed to be him doing Around the World. It was some absolute arse. It was going to be like one of those like your classic like BBC 1980s like Noel Edmonds. It might even have been Noel fucking Edmonds. I forget who, but it was definitely somebody like, oh, fuck it, I'm glad that didn't
definitely
happen.
wasn't Noel Edmonds, but okay.
Well, this is rather embarrassing because actually it was meant to be Noel Edmonds. Jesus.
All right. But either way, it fell into his lap. And now, yeah, he's got as many like frothy ales and comfortable armchairs as he wants the rest of his days. But Idle wants like swimming pools and, you know, and models. And he doesn't have to be sleeping with the models, but the models have to be interested in him. Do you know what I mean? Like that, I think, is what Idle needs. He needs to be standing by a swimming pool in the sunshine while a model pretends to be interested in what he's saying. Like that's what he wants out of life.
I think it was also
armchairs and beers with Terry Gilliam, and Idle wants very attractive women pretending to be interested in him.
I think it was also the number of times he's rehashed "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life" as well, where you're just like, you know, because Gary Lineker said to him like, "Oh, they're singing it in football stands, so you should do another version of it." And so like he releases "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life" in like the 90s or whatever, and goes on Top of the Pops, and then when Spamalot comes around, he crowbars in "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life" in Spamalot, because it's almost like he's like, well, if I write 3 songs and steal 2 of Neil's and then rehash 2 others from like that already exist in Python, like
Bob's Your Uncle,
that's a show. Bob's Your Uncle. Oh, what a musical! But just to wrap it up, I honestly want to write now a futuristic film in which the head of a long dead comedian is resurrected, put on a robot, and forced to perform old vaudevillian sketches for oil until his soul is somehow reconnects with him and he breaks free. And I don't know. That's as far as but that's
the sequel. Him breaking free and running off into the distance, like that's the end of the movie.
That's the arc of the movie. You've got to have his redemption plot in the arc of the movie.
Well,
and
no,
if he
I think the
starts the movie,
is him running away, right? Is him gaining the soul over the course of the movie, right? And then at the end, he runs away, free from ever having to perform nudge ever again.
It's like,
and then in like Idle 3000 to whatever it's going to be called. That's when he starts playing old Neil Innes songs in like a post-apocalyptic pub for coins while young attractive bar wenches pretend to be interested in it.
And then Neil Innes's ghost comes back and kills him. But no, I think that the 7, I wouldn't have made it Idle, but I would have just made it like an old vaudevillian comedian or whatever. But I like the idea of,
hey man, maybe you can idle me, steal the idea, and give me no credit, and be in enough swimming pools and disinterested models as you can handle.
Listen, I give you very little credit for this podcast. And you've been doing it with me.
I don't deserve any, so that's.
You've been doing it with me for 8
arrangement.
years.
Do you know what I mean? In terms of like apportioning blame for the podcast, I'm happy to like take less of it.
Do you? Yeah, I think 2021 it'll be like either 7 or 8 years of you doing the podcast and 10 years of me doing the podcast.
Wow, that is a lot.
Yeah. But no, it's very exciting. But yeah, so that's all. Idol, severed head in a fridge. I love that imagery. I love that it's a combination between Mad Max and Idol's 8 swimming pools. That's the story. How many swimming pools do I need to maintain?
What are we doing next week? What's the next?
The next chronologically bad film in
I feel like
Idol's...
we're doing like the Ghost of Christmas Past, right, Joe? We're like taking Idol back, do you know what I mean? Like through his darkest moments.
That's amazing. That's definitely what we're doing. We're taking Eric Idle back through the worst moments of his life. So hopefully, I don't know, he breaks down crying.
He writes Neil Innes a check. Like, that's what we wanted to do. That's his like waving money at a turkey right on Christmas morning. It's like Neil Innes has enough to fucking live now. Do you know what I mean? Neil Innes could buy a sandwich.
Dude, Neil Innes is dead.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, Neil Innes died. So
Jesus.
It's too late for any redemptive arc.
Too late for Innes.
It's too late for any redemptive arc from Idol. She could maybe give Innes's widow a check. Like that could Idol gives Innes's widow a check and looks thoroughly ashamed for the rest of his life. that if that comes out of this ridiculous podcast series. So the next movie that we have to cover is 1993's Splitting Heirs.
Oh God, is it Splitting Heirs next? Is it? We can't rent that one, right?
What?
It's Burn Hollywood Burn. What was the other one? Was it
Too Much Sun?
Too Much Sun was the other one we could rent. Okay.
But the next two we have to watch.
What was the first one you sent me? Was that Splitting Heirs? Was the first one you sent me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have that one.
So we have Splitting Heirs and then Missing Pieces and then Too Much Sun.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to Splitting Heirs.
And actually, I'm a little tempted, and just see how you feel about this.
Okay.
The movie before Too Much Sun is Nuns on the Run.
Okay.
I wonder if we don't do Too Much Sun and then end on Nuns on the Run, because it probably will be the best of the 5.
So we do 5 Idol movies?
Yes.
Okay, I tell you what then. If we're going to end on Nuns on the Run, let's just see how we feel when we get to the end.
What, Too Much Sun?
The 4th one of whatever it is.
Too Much Sun.
Too Much Sun, yeah.
Yeah. Too Much Sun is the one way...
If we want to go there and like redeem Idol in some way.
We have to find some way...
I do have fond memories of Nuns on the Run.
Right.
So I'm at least reasonably intrigued by it.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be terrible. So maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised.
Okay.
Anyway, Thank you ever so much.
Cool. All right, man. Well, that was fun. I enjoyed it.
It was great.
So when you Google like Burn Hollywood Burn Eric Idle, as I have been all the week leading up to this podcast, trying to find anything about this film and about Eric Idle's response to it, you will come across a YouTube video which has only had 213 views of a song called I'm Not Orson Welles by Eric Idle. That was uploaded on June 2nd, 2015 by a Frank Howson. And it says, this song was written by Frank Howson and John Capek for the Joe Eszterhas movie Burn Hollywood Burn, but not used in the final cut. So what you're about to hear is a song that Joe Eszterhas, even though he had no soundtrack, still didn't want to use in his film. Anyway, Frank Howson, who co-wrote the song, goes on to say it was performed superbly by Eric Idle, of Monty Python in parentheses, even though that would be assumed, who does his impressions of Bob Dylan and Elvis Presley during the song. You will be the judge as to whether the song is performed superbly by Eric Idle. Anyway, recording was produced by John Capek. This clip is a loving tribute to the genius that was Orson Welles and was compiled and edited by Frank Howson. So, it's a weird little curio that I say has only had 213 views in the last 5 years since it was uploaded on YouTube. But I thought I would add it to this podcast for your listening pleasure. So here's 3 minutes and 5 seconds of Eric Idle, just utterly destroying an impersonation of Bob Dylan and Elvis Presley. And I couldn't think of a better way to end this podcast on one of the worst films I've ever seen. Enjoy, if that's possible.
You played your part, and I could really shoot this scene. I'm an amateur director, soon to be a has-been. And I've heard the score before, and I know how you feel. Our lives are on celluloid, let's make it look real. I could grab your hand as the music swells, but I'm just horsing around, and I'm not Orson Welles. I love you so, I've forgotten my next line. There's something to do with truth, but is it yours or is it mine? We played the scene before, if we can't say goodbye, I'll rewrite the script. This time you won't have to cry. I could cut loose as the music swells, but I'm just horsing around, and I'm not Orson Welles.
I could rescue you.
Excuse me?
Mission, baby.
Who's this guy?
But I can't do everything.
Where'd you come in, man?
All right.
Hey, this
And
must
a
be my gig.
salesman sails.
Yeah, I'm on the Smithee Film.
No,
Yeah.
I can't
You're dead.
do everything. I'm not
I don't like this.
Orson
Makes me feel very uncomfortable. I'm not Orson Welles.
Welles.
You're not even Elvis anymore. I could grab your hand as the music swells, but I'm just horsing around, and I'm not Orson Welles.
No, I'm
No, I'm not Orson Welles. Yeah, man, that's cool. I like that, boys. I like that.
Hey, man, I left the building.
Yeah. Man, like a vision from God.